Evening all. Now, going back about 5 or 6 years to about 2015, 2016, a lot of people were becoming despairing at the radical progressive left and the social justice warriors as the social justice movement rose up and started flexing its muscle. And this was pretty much in the aftermath of Gamergate. Gamergate was the touch paper for this. And these people were a mixture of conservatives, the mainstream right, libertarians, the centrists, and some on the centre left. And what happened was that loose alliances were formed as certain people rose to prominence on YouTube and on other social media. And all of a sudden, these people that before had disagreed over matters of, say, economics or the role of the state seemed to be united in cause that were saying that the radical progressive left were becoming dangerous. They were stifling freedom of speech, freedom of thought, just individual liberties were being crushed coming out of academia on the campuses and in the media, and it was filtering through to government, and something should be done. So people rose up and spoke, and they started making videos on YouTube, and thus political YouTube came into being. And this alliance held for some time. As I said, these people didn't have all the same opinions politically, but they believed in certain core values, and it was based around classical liberalism, the type that emerged from the United Kingdom and then subsequently America in the 18th century and early 19th centuries. And so people started getting interested in the philosophy. They started getting interested in the people like particularly Burke and Thomas Paine, Locke, John Stuart Mill, and even going back a little bit further into the 17th century philosophy. But this idea of classical liberalism was what bound us together, even though we differed on kind of a number of issues. Then what happened was that we all built each other up and people slightly shifted their political stances, but essentially we all agreed that some form of capitalist society that was and liberal democracy was the best. And we just kind of had this agreement. Then it hit its peak in about 2018. And after that, in 2019, I noticed that things started falling apart. The loose bonds, the loose association that encompassed all these people calling themselves classical liberals started falling apart. And I traced that back to the emergence of the Groypers. Now, the Groypers claim to be a new right-wing group, kind of linked to the alt-right, but called themselves a different name. And what they were most interested in was discrediting mainstream conservatives. They felt that mainstream conservatives were the big threat, not the progressive social justice warrior left, but the conservatives. They were the weaklings. They were the sellouts. They were the ones that were in cahoots with the progressive left. And so what the Groypers did was try and discredit by showing up to talks being given by well-known mainstream conservatives and trying to humiliate them or trying to ask them impossible questions. Hey, Ben Shapiro, why won't you talk to me? And I found them a ludicrous bunch, but people liked them because they were spicy, they were edgy. And I always say, beware of the spicy take. Who's it coming from, and are they being sincere? And I didn't think for one moment that the Groypers were being sincere, and I thought they were threats right from day one. But they were effective. They came in and they weakened the bonds between the different groups. This kind of what was eventually termed the intellectual dark web, or the Alternative Influence Network report, this piece of pseudo-academia where some kind of spirograph chart of who was connected to who once passed a member of the alt-right in a corridor once, and they're linked somehow. And that chart was drawn up by a left-wing pseudo-academic who wanted it to be a hit list. Present this to the media, present this to academia, and saying these are the people that need to be cancelled, have their social media accounts removed, and to be purged from the public discourse. And so what happened was that the Groypers came in and weakened all this. And then we found out that there were some people in the alliance, like the Warski brothers, who really were charlatans. They're in this alliance pretty much under false pretenses. They showed their true colours. But by 2019, 2020, this alliance of classical liberals fell apart. Some people even distancing themselves from the term classical liberal as they became more and more enamored with the idea of a benevolent dictator replacing democracy in the West. So to these people, pure political purity became the thing. In fact, it leaked into moral purity as well. Where at once kind of humorous memes mocking the excesses of modern society, and particularly the left, suddenly became a test of purity, and language and jargon evolved. That if you weren't using the jargon words, you were a cuck. That was the term. You were a cuck. Cuck's been used so often that it's now is like calling anybody a fascist. It's just losing its meaning. It's losing its power because it's been overused. But the thing is that you use the jargon, and if somebody didn't use the jargon, it was a signifier that they were out of the purity spiral. Now, Don the Pleb over at his channel Plebeian Media did an excellent live stream video on this, which I recommend, called The Purity Spiral. And if you go to his channel, Don the Pleb, Plebeian Media, Purity Spiral, you'll find it. And he said the progressive leftism is like a hurtling express train. And everybody's on it, but people decide to get off that express train at various points. So there's some people who jumped off the train early, and there's some that left it a little bit later before they jumped off, and then other people who have gone quite far on the progressive left train before they decided to jump off. And I'm thinking about people from the American Democrat Party walk away movement, people who are fed up with the excesses of the radical left and quit the Democrat Party. And in the United Kingdom, I would say people like Andrew Doyle and Paul Embry fit that category as well. Now, Don was saying that where you jumped off the train is roughly what your politics are. So if you jumped off super early, then your politics are very much on the right. And those people who jumped off later on will have some nominal left-wing ideas. Maybe they like a little bit of welfare state, or maybe they like a bit of the idea of wealth distribution, but they are still all in favor of many things, such as freedom of speech, freedom of expression, the rights of the individual, and a basic capitalist society with a small-ish government. Though some people who jumped off the train later on might not want the smallish government part, but they wouldn't want a government that just interferes in your daily life. So, what does this mean in light of purity spirals? Well, the people who jumped off the train super early seem to be in a purity spiral where they can't stand the people who jumped off the train later on and refuse to have anything to do with them and accuse them all of being leftists. And so they end up in this purity spiral. And anytime somebody weakens or shows signs of being a cuck, they get ejected. And so that's another jargon term, eject such and such. And so the spiral just continues and continues to get smaller. And what happens is we ended up in the situation that we are now, where the online race is fragmented, various groups aren't talking to each other, various groups refuse to work with one another. And I myself am part of that. There's a few people who I just don't want to work with ever again. That's an issue based around trust and honesty, as opposed to ideological thought. But it's made it difficult, and at times when we're fragmented, that's when the left seem to be in lockstep, and they seem to be unified, and they make the greatest progress when we are divided. And there was some real checks on their grab for power when we came together and we spoke up and we put various issues into the public eye, and we called out the left-wing leaning media because we could all support one another and we could get the message out there. And as smaller groups, the left are now playing a kind of divide and rule strategy where they've got us fragmented and running off to different social media sites, then pulling the plug on various ones. The other thing they're doing is, and this is where I think the Groypers really are in league with the radical left, is that they're trying to get us to fragment and not communicate, not work with each other. And I think this is a huge mistake. Now, the two mistakes have been made. One, that unless you're ideologically pure, you can be of no use and you should be cast aside, you should be ejected. The second mistake is that we all have to think the same. We all have to be ideologically on the same page in any of our endeavours. And again, that's not true as well. We can come together on various single issues and we should work together on various single issues. Today on Twitter, Paul Embry, a left-wing journalist, a member of the Labour Party, said that the big problem on the left is this hatred of patriotism, hatred of one's own country. And he says that's where a huge problem lies. Now, I can work with Paul Embry on the idea of rekindling patriotism in your home countries. I think this is actually a good idea. I think he's on the money. But he's a member of the Labour Party and he has a lot of left-wing views. Does that mean I have to cast him aside, never work with him? Our paths should never cross? Of course not. If we are in agreement on something, I will support him. And I think there are other things that if you are a libertarian and you agree with me on a few things, and I agree with you on a few things, we should work together to combat the greater problems that are facing us. But instead, unless I'm like an ANCAP libertarian, you can't work with me under what we've got now. I am impure. I'm a cuck. And I'll look at you and I think, well, you're just a useful idiot to the left. And then we don't get anything done. We don't get anything done when we're turning on each other. That's what the left want. The left want us all to turn on each other and be fragmented. So I'm saying we've got to get real. And we've got to reforge the alliance where we were back 2016 to 2018, where we were at our strongest. But now we've learned the tactics a little bit better. We've learned strategy a bit better. And we know that we can come together. And things like the Free Speech Union and Save Our Statues are great examples of this, where we can come together and form pressure groups on single issues and win. And we've done that. And also, there's the Defund the BBC campaign as well. Now, it's tougher in America at the moment. I'm not sure where it's all going to end because we have things like so many issues and they've got so many problems they're going to face them under the Biden administration. But at least in the United Kingdom, there are some causes that have sprung up and like Brexit did. Brexit pulled together people from the left, right and centre to work together to a common cause. And that's what we've got to do again. And we've got to rekindle, reforge the bonds. But we've got to treat each other fairly and honestly. We can't smear people because they just don't measure up to your standards of purity. Get real about the people that are alongside you in the fight. Get real. Just accept they're not you. They're not going to think exactly like you. They're going to be different on a few issues. Some of them, they may be soft around the edges. They may be too conciliatory. But nonetheless, occasionally they'll come up with something, they'll say something, they'll do something that you think, actually, that's worth supporting. We've got to start thinking like that, start thinking strategically. We can achieve so little if we are fragmented and we allow our differences on one or two issues to drive us apart. Because on the left, they're very good at closing ranks when they need to. And now when we are united and we're pushing back and we work together as a team, it's the left who start fragmenting across their fault lines. At the moment, what happens is the left are pretty much in lockstep, and it's us that are fragmenting on the fault lines. So let's think about ways we can start rekindling alliances, build that classical liberal alliance again, but be smarter next time. because we know what the pitfalls are. And I'll leave with that. Have a great week. See you later.